City Council, I was attacked, predictably, across the board on my Republican Party affiliation. I was called a Donald Trump fanatic. I was called a white supremacist. Everything down the line I was called. I'm very happy to report that when I ran for re-election in March, I was the top vote getter in my city's city council election of 9 candidates, and I was also the highest vote getter in the history of my city. So I'm very, very pleased with that. Without compromising your principles. We don't need to do it for strategic reasons, and we ought never to do it for moral reasons. So remember that. You can win as a Republican. I'm very excited about that, and I look forward to meeting many of you as the evening progresses. Thank you.
So I'm very happy to see that the room is filling out. Very happy to see that the room is filling out, and we should have some more people popping in here. Is this on? Can you all hear me? Okay, good.
Turn it up.
So, before I bring up our featured speaker, just a few words if you're unfamiliar with the Republican Liberty Caucus. As a matter of fact, before I even get to the Republican Liberty Caucus, let's just have a reading, because it's well worth repeating, that the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution reads, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." And you can't really say it any clearer than that, but maybe we should try anyway, because some people still aren't getting it. So the Republican Liberty Caucus has been around since 1991. It's a national organization. I'm the chairman of the state chapter. My name is Nate Hancock. To my left is Chris Kolsky, my vice chair. And the organization is grassroots based. So we have lots of room for you to lead your local chapter in how you grow and the issues that you focus on. So on a broad view, the Republican Liberty Caucus focuses on the Constitution, that we enforce really the Constitution because it does not enforce itself. That we look at the Bill of Rights as sacrosanct, that we look at the Article 1, Section 8 powers as the powers delegated to the federal government, no more and no fewer, and that when the Constitution is, ignored or is somehow the power that was, supposed to remain with the people in the states, whenever that power is usurped by the federal government, that it's our duty to really defend those rights. And the Second Amendment might seem like an issue that, well, look, we're at a Republican convention. Everyone's on the same page on the Second Amendment, but it really shouldn't be taken for granted. Because as soon as it is taken for granted, then really we get taken for a ride. And we end up having moderate Republicans or rhinos, as some people call them, like voting in gun control legislation.
Yep.
So, we expect it from the other side.
It's already happening.
But we really shouldn't be surprised, even when we see it in our own party.
In Oregon, Republicans are voting for gun control.
Our goal, of course, is to make it so that we are surprised if they ever dare do it. But we do have some work to do in returning the Republican Party to principle, and that's what the Republican Liberty Caucus does. Our membership drives our activism. So our memberships are $45 a year, and that $45 is split 3 ways. So 15 to the local chapter, 15 to the state, and 15 to national. And there are Republican endorsed candidates in high office, like Dana Rohrabacher, Tom McClintock in California, in San Diego County, Senator Joel Anderson, State Senator Joel Anderson has spoken at our Orange County chapter meetings. Nationally, there are more. But if you have more questions about the Republican Liberty Caucus, you can come in and meet Chris and me. We also have members here. If you're a member already of the RLC, would you raise your hand? Excellent. Yes. So again, we really appreciate y'all coming out. Our speaker today, I came in contact with our speaker through another board member on the RLC. So, I feel like, without making a formal statement of the RLC endorsing 100% of what this organization does, I'll say that the RLC endorses 100% of what this organization does. We are extremely proud to have DeLuz of the Firearms Policy Coalition come and speak. Before he comes up, I I wanted to encourage you to subscribe to their YouTube channel and Firearms Policy Coalition. If you Google it, you'll come up with it. I believe the website is just firearmspolicy.org. It's a great organization. They focus on legislation in Sacramento, but also what's coming out of D.C. And I think that what you'll hear tonight is going to make you
This is the Republican Liberty Caucus for the state of
fuzzy
California.
on the Second Amendment. It's really going to tighten your resolve. And even if you feel that you're the most hardcore gun advocate there could be, I think this is going to add even more valuable perspective for you, so that you can speak to really anyone and everyone across the state of California and really hopefully turn things around. This speech is going to make you as optimistic as it makes us in the organization as we came across. So we couldn't be more honored to have and to now bring up Craig DeLuz of the Firearms Policy Coalition.
That was some introduction. You set a pretty high bar for me. I can hardly wait to hear what I say. Well, once again, my name is Craig DeLuz, and I am the Director of Legislative and Public Affairs for the Firearms Policy Coalition. Now, let me start by asking this. How many of you have heard of the NRA? How many of you have heard of Gun Owners of California? California Rifle Pistol Association. How many of you have heard of the Firearms Policy Coalition? Okay, a handful. Very, very good. The Firearms Policy Coalition has been in existence for about 4 years. And the reason why the Firearms Policy Coalition came to be in existence was because they felt like there was a void that wasn't quite being filled amongst the current groups that advocate on behalf of the Second Amendment. I think the best way to explain what FPC is first and foremost to tell you what FPC is not. We are not a conservative organization. We have within our organization liberals, libertarians, and conservatives. I myself happen to be a card-carrying member of the vast right-wing conspiracy. But we have the entire diaspora, right? The other thing we're not a Republican organization. Once again, we have conservatives, we have liberals. Some of our most ardent members are liberals who live in the Silicon Valley. You'd be surprised, but many of them are immigrants who came to this country from countries where they didn't have the right to keep and bear arms. And so they've invested in their rights now that they're here in the United States, and they don't want to see that investment go by the wayside. But they also know what tyranny looks like. And they see the face of tyranny every day when they start to see the first thing that someone wants to attempt to do, when they want to take away all of your rights, when they want to impose their will upon you, the first thing that they seek to do is to disarm you. The other thing that we're not a public safety advocacy group. We don't deal with law and order. That's not our job. We don't deal with education. That's not our job. We advocate on behalf of one thing, and that is the Second Amendment as a civil right. And I think that's important to understand when I say a civil right. See, we've allowed the term civil rights to be taken away or to be obfuscated. You know, see, liberals want you to believe that civil rights means special privileges for special people. If you happen to be the right gender, if you happen to be the right religion, if you happen to be the right sexual orientation or sexual preference, if you happen to be the right ethnicity, the right skin color, well then you, my friend, are entitled to special rights. Oh, I forgot. If you happen to have a certain amount of money and contribute that money to their causes, well then you, my friend, are deemed to be then be able to access your civil rights. But see, that's not what civil rights mean at all. Civil rights are about those rights that are available to all of us, to each and every one of us as residents and citizens of this great nation. We take those rights, and those rights are enumerated in our Constitution in the Bill of Rights. Now, noted that I say they aren't given to us by the Bill of Rights. They are enumerated in the Bill of Rights. Because our civil rights are they're based on fundamental human rights. In fact, much of the debate as the Constitution was being put together was talking about we need to make sure that we have this announcement of our rights so that people understand that they have basic fundamental rights. And that those rights shall not be infringed. For some reason, people seem to think that the Bill of Rights is about me, the individual, and what other people... No, they're about individuals' rights, but it's mostly talking about what the government cannot do to infringe upon those rights. So that gives you an idea of who the Firearms Policy Coalition is. So to that end, we don't just advocate on behalf of Second Amendment legislation. We advocate on free speech legislation, on private property rights legislation, on due process, on open government. These are all things because we happen to believe that our fundamental rights, they're holistic. You can't just take one part. You can't take one and say, okay, well, I don't necessarily agree with that one. Because that's what many on the left believe. They believe that the Second Amendment, first of all, many of them don't believe it should be a right.
Yeah.
They believe that, well, that was founded, or as Reggie Jones-Sawyer, Assemblyman Reggie Jones-Sawyer, the chairman of the Public Safety Committee, put it, well, that was written at a time when, we were having to deal with a tyrannical government. But our government's not tyrannical anymore.
Oh, brother.
Then Donald Trump got elected. To the left, that is a tyrannical government.
Oh, brother.
But the point being is that part of what we're talking about here is the ability to keep it from becoming tyrannical. It is vital that we are involved in all aspects of civil rights advocacy. And by the way, when I say we're not just a Republican or conservative organization, I truly mean that. Now, the Republican Party has at its core support for the Second Amendment. And most Republican legislators have at their core support for the Second Amendment and seeking to expand and protect those rights. My biggest challenge, though, is that not all. See, somewhere, let me just tell you this, and I know you probably already know this. Somewhere in this building, there is a group of Republicans who are saying, if we were just more like the Democrats, we could win. No. If we were more like the Democrats, we would be Democrats. When we as a country, when we as a party have been the most successful, it's been when we have stood for the values upon which not only our party was founded, but upon which our nation was founded. When we don't try to put our colors out there in a soft pastel, but when they are bright and bold and beautiful, and we communicate them in a way that resonates beyond just our base, but that touch the hearts of each and every American, or in our case, each and every Californian, that's when we, as Republicans, have been successful. But for some reason, and I blame what I call the consultant class.
Charles Munger.
These are the people who lose election after election and yet somehow keep making money. They keep getting higher. I don't know how they do it. I wish I could figure out how they do it. But they keep losing election after election. They keep running candidate after candidate after candidate. And they keep losing, and yet they keep still saying, well, we need to be more like the Democrats. We need to be scared of it. No, we don't. We need to draw that distinction. Because let me tell you something. When I say, one of my sayings is, I say, this is a fight for civil rights. We have got to use them, or we are going to lose them. And I will tell you, I see it every day as I advocate here in California, in Nevada, as we fight in Washington, D.C., as we have our lobbyists working in Washington and Oregon. Their goal is to subvert your rights. Not just the Second Amendment, but the First Amendment.
Yep.
What would you say if I told you that in a gun store in California, if you own a gun store, you are not allowed to have a picture of a handgun on the outside of your store? Imagine if you own a car dealership and couldn't have a picture of a car on the outside of your store.
Wow, that's outrageous.
Right? I mean, they hate tobacco, but guess what? You can have a picture of a cigar on the outside of your cigar shop. That's the state of California.
I'm just curious, which kills more people, tobacco or firearms?
There's always there's a human element to both. Now, isn't there?
I think of the tobacco probably
here's
worse.
Another one. So in the state of California, a lot of people don't realize this. So a lot of the billboards that face highways many of them are controlled by the state. And so the state often gives control of those billboards to local municipalities. Now, in that agreement, One of the things that they often do is say what you can and cannot advertise. You're not allowed to have sexually explicit material. You're not allowed to promote certain things like, oh, I don't know, firearms or anything firearm related. These are state-run billboards. They're saying that you can't advertise anything promoting the exercising of a constitutionally enumerated right. That's the state of California. But does it stop at free speech? Oh, nay, 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 I say. Let's talk about, due process. How many of you here are familiar with gun violence restraining orders? Gun violence restraining orders. Basically, someone who is close to you, in this case, a family member, or someone goes to a local judge and says, I believe that so-and-so is, what's your name?
Greg.
Greg. I believe that Greg is a danger to himself or others. And therefore, he needs to be disarmed. Now, this is an ex parte hearing. Ex parte means you don't get to be there. You don't even know about it. So at this hearing, this judge is supposed to hear evidence from one side about why Greg is a danger to others. Now, how many of you here want to know that no one wants to be the judge that didn't issue the gun violence restraining order and then have something happen? Right? They see it just like any other protection order. Well, why not? Okay, so then they issue it. Now, with it, though, comes what's called a gun seizure warrant. This says, in this gun seizure warrant, it will allow law enforcement to search anywhere that Greg lives, resides, works, any place that he might potentially have hidden a firearm. His friend's house, his mother's house, his brother's house, anywhere. So that sounds like unreasonable search and seizure, right?
Yeah.
Okay, almost forgot that one. But so now here's what happens. So then law enforcement gets this warrant. It says that Greg is such a danger to himself or others, he has lost his right to own or possess firearms. We believe that he has firearms, and he is dangerous. Now, how many of you know? How many of you know that is putting Greg in a very dangerous situation? How many of you know that's putting law enforcement in a very dangerous situation? When we had this bill, when this bill was heard in the state of Nevada, the law enforcement basically said, "Well, we show up. We're not showing up with flowers and candy. We're showing up in full tactical gear because, once again, we've been told that this individual is armed and dangerous, and our job is to disarm them." So think about that. You have due process rights because, by the way, when you do eventually get a hearing, 21 days later, you go in and you now have to prove that you are not a danger to yourself or others.
Whoa.
So you are now guilty until proven innocent. And they don't tell you what standard you have to meet. They don't tell you if you have to get a lawyer. They don't tell you if you need to get some sort of a psychological evaluation. Mind you, there's been absolutely no mental health evaluation in this entire process. So, due process rights, unreasonable search and seizure, private property rights, because guess what? They are going to take your stuff. And yes, your guns are your stuff. They are your private property.
Yes.
All of these rights are being, and by the way, your right to keep and bear arms. See, they believe that they can infringe on whatever rights they want because guns. Because guns. They believe that they can pass laws limiting where you can put a gun store. In the county of Alameda, we have a lawsuit. It's Teixeira versus the county of Alameda, where an individual wanted to open a gun store. There's only one problem. Because of their zoning laws, there's no place in the unincorporated county in the unincorporated county where you can open a gun store. They've written a law in such a way, it's so bad that even the existing gun stores, which have been grandfathered in, don't meet the standard. There's no place in the county. So those are saying, you have a right to own a firearm, you just don't have a right to sell it or buy one. I guess they want you to steal it. I don't know. I'm just following their logic, not mine. It's their logic, not mine.
Alameda County,
right?
There ain't no such thing as logic.
They want to say that you don't have a... More and more what they're doing is they're trying to eliminate your right and your ability to be able to exercise your right. They realize they can't take away your right to keep and bear arms, the right to own a firearm. But they can say you don't have right to ammunition.
Oh.
Maybe we can't make a registry of firearms, and guess what? I can register what ammunition you buy. So that I know what firearms you have. I always find that interesting because I always say, well, so in other words, if I go and over the next 2 years, I buy 5,000 rounds of ammunition, and for any of you who are active, I don't want to use the term active shooter. That's, no active shooters here. But for those of you who actively participate in shooting sports, or at the very least, take your ownership of a firearm seriously and spend time training, you know that 5,000 rounds in a couple of years is not a lot of ammunition. In particular, if you own multiple firearms. But my question is if I bought that much ammunition over 3 years, do they consider that stockpiling? Am I going to get a knock at my door from law enforcement? Because keep in mind, they've proposed this. This is something that they've proposed. Hasn't passed yet. Here's a crazy thing I'll tell you about Proposition 63. And our Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom and his proposed measure that he put up. It was a conglomeration of a bunch of bills that were so bad that the California state legislature, the most anti-gun in the country, wouldn't pass. And Jerry Brown, one of the most liberal governors in the country, wouldn't sign. That's how bad these ideas were. So what did Gavin Newsom do? Scooped them all up and put them in an initiative. And now they are law. The California Department of Justice is scrambling because even they don't know how to implement these laws. In their defense, they were handed a steaming pile of chicken manure. And they were told to make chicken salad. And I don't know, there's not enough mayonnaise in the entire world. Yeah, anyway, but I say that to say that and I think all of us get this. You know, what I appreciate about the Republican Liberty Caucus is they're like, look, the Constitution says what it means and means what it says. If you want to know what it means, if you want to know what the framers meant, look at the words they used and what they meant at the time. Now, some of that you have to extrapolate into the future. Otherwise, the internet wouldn't be protected by free speech. But at the other end, what I find very difficult to understand is how they can argue that, well, they meant, single-shot muskets when they wrote the Second Amendment, but when they wrote the First Amendment, they didn't just mean a quill and parchment. But the thing is that the Constitution is what it is, and it says what it says. Now, some want to say, well, it's a living, breathing document that grows over time. I would happen to agree, because there was a process that was put in place in order to be able to change that Constitution. It's called the amendment process.
Yes.
You want to get rid of the Second Amendment? Put it before the people. Good luck with that. Because, see, people understand that very fundamental human right. That fundamental human right that says, I have a right to be able to defend myself and my family and my property. I was speaking one time to a group from Korean radio, and they were fascinated by America and they refer to as our obsession with gun ownership.
Wow.
And, I had to share with them that, one of the first things that happens when a despot comes into power that they want to do is they want to try and disarm their citizenry. Because that's the only way in which they can inflict all of the other tyrannical acts in which they wish to impose. I said, you, even most of all, being from South Korea, only need look to the north to see exactly what that looks like. I want to bring all of this back to start talking about the Republican Party. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I was born in Richmond, California. Anyone here familiar with Richmond?
Is that in Alameda County?
Conservative bastion. It's now real conservative. How many of you here saw Coach Carter? Anyway, that was about Richmond. Anyway, so being from Richmond, it's not very conservative. My mother and father were both avid Democrats. My brother, my actual twin brother, fraternal twin, but my twin brother was the president of the Greater Sacramento Urban League, as well as the president of the NAACP. So you can tell that I was literally surrounded by Democrats. But what was interesting was my mother and father were very conservative. They believed in individual responsibility. They believed in gun ownership. My father owned firearms. They believed in traditional family values. They believed in strong national security. They also believed in making sure that our borders were secure. These were my parents. My mother, I would say, on some issues, in particular when it came to international issues, she was to the right of Pat Buchanan. For those of you who remember who Pat Buchanan is. But they always voted Democrat because they just believed that's what they were supposed to do. That's what they were surrounded by. It wasn't until I went to school in Chico, California. How many of you here are familiar with Chico? How many of you know Chico's different than Richmond? Like most universities, Chico is probably very, very liberal on campus. But the community at large was largely conservative. So it was my first opportunity to really be exposed to conservative values and to come to know and understand what that meant. And what was interesting, what I found was as time went on, I found that I was agreeing more and more with conservatives and I was agreeing less and less with liberals. Now, the fact that I was a finance major probably meant I was doomed to eventually become a Republican. But really, for me, what was the tipping point was this. I ran for student body president at Chico State. And I was already the director of the Wildcat Enterprises. I ran all of the student businesses. We were the third largest employer in the city of Chico. And I walked into there was only like 286 black students at Chico State when I attended there. And I remember every Friday we had this thing called Open Line Friday where a bunch of us got together in the big lecture halls and we just talked about whatever the issues of the day was. And I remember the professor there, Rich McClinney, said, Chico State will never elect a black AS president. Well, I took that as a challenge because I was the first one ever to be on the board. So I said, I entered the race. I won with 50.6% of the vote. It was a landslide. But here's what it was that got me. I was supported by the Progressive Student Union and the Young Americans for Freedom. Now, here's the difference. The Progressive Student Union supported me because they figured that because of the color of my skin, I would be supportive of all of the affirmative action programs and all of the liberal ethnic things that they believed in. The Young Americans for Freedom liked the fact that I talked about fiscal accountability, making sure that the resources that were brought in through student fees were allocated in the way in which they were supposed to be, that the student-run businesses were run efficiently, and anything that was extra would go back to the students. So in other words, one group judged me by the content of my character, and the other judged me by the color of my skin. And it wasn't the one that they thought would. And that made me realize, and I'm just going to be real with you. I became a Republican not because I liked Republicans. All my friends were Democrats. I became a Republican because I knew that I had a responsibility to be involved in the world around me, to understand that what I learned in student government was that there were decisions being made every day that affected my everyday life, my opportunities, that I knew nothing about. And that I needed to be involved in that decision-making process. Because I need to advocate for people who thought like I thought. I need to advocate for my children and the next generation that's coming forward. I needed to get involved. But I couldn't get involved in a group whose values were so contrary to what I knew to be right. It wasn't the people that made me become Republican. It was the values. And see, where we as a party, where we have lost it, where we have lost our way, is when we start getting Republicans saying, I am willing to sacrifice my values in order to gain power. I say that if you sacrifice your values, then your power is meaningless.
Yep. Oh, that's it.
It is worth nothing. When we talk about the Second Amendment, it's not just about the ability to own a gun. It's about an understanding that I have a right and a responsibility to stand up for myself, to stand up for my family, and to stand up for my community. Individual responsibility starts with the ability to be able to defend yourself, to be able to care for yourself, to be able to provide for yourself. But when we as a party say, well, okay, we need to promote more social programs that will do what the people should be doing. We're going to advocate for more environmental policies that are going to infringe on an individual's right to be able to provide for their family. We're going to kill 100,000 jobs in order to reduce carbon dioxide particulates 0.0001%. When they say that we are going to take away your fundamental right to be able to defend yourself so that they can feel safe. What I love about some of these laws is this, is that, I always say, laws only apply to the law-abiding. They have a bill now, there's a law now, AB 857, which says that if you have an unserialized firearm, it now has to be serialized. Because they're concerned because people are making what they call ghost guns. They're unserialized firearms. They're what's called 80% lowers. They're built to a certain point, so they are technically not a firearm. People are finishing out those firearms, and now they're unregistered firearms. And I still remember sitting there, and I'm like, okay, so let's role play. I am a bank robber. I am going to rob a bank. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get my 80% lower. I'm going to build it out. I'm going to put on my scope. I'm going to put on my red dot sight. I'm going to put my forward pistol grip. I'm going to put in my high cap magazine. What else? I'm going to put on my bump stock. Oh yeah, okay. Now I'm ready to go. Oh wait. Did anybody call DOJ? We got to get a serial number for this. Maybe it's just me. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's the pessimist in me. I just don't see that happening. Okay, so here's another one. So, then I stopped to think, okay, well, they talk about like a cooling off period, right? We have in California, we have a 10-day waiting period. Now, what's interesting is in the state of California, if I have a concealed carry permit, right? I walk into a gun store in order to purchase a firearm. I can sit there, I can fill out all the paperwork, I can pay for it, and I have to wait 10 days to get my firearm. All the time, I have a gun on my hip. If I already own a firearm, why do I need to cool off? But this is the insanity that they want to perpetuate because passing laws make them feel safe. You know what they want to feel safe from? From you. They don't want to feel safe.
Feel powerful.
Because if they did, they wouldn't have passed Senate Bill 620.
And distract
Senate
from
Bill
their
620 is a measure that basically potentially reduces the criminal penalty when a criminal uses a firearm in the commission of a crime. Yes. So in other words, law-abiding citizens, you make a mistake, you are a criminal. If you're a criminal and you commit a gun with a crime, well, we're now going to reduce your sentence. And that's because this is what they believe, all right? If you're a criminal, then you are clearly a victim of society. Society did something to you, and then you know what? We need to start to cut you a break. That's why they passed laws like Prop 47, like AB 109, that let criminals out of jail. That's why they passed laws like Senate Bill 54, which creates a sanctuary state. Because evidently, the laws are oppressive. But those of you who want to protect yourselves, because see, you do have a need to protect them. I'm just going to be real with you. For the last 3 years, we've actually seen not just crime, but violent crime go up in the state of California. Right? But if you want to protect yourself from those criminals, well, there's something wrong with you. There must be. You must be a criminal. They want to protect themselves and their constituents from you. They want to feel safe from you. And, you know, it's funny. I look back and every time I have this debate with folks, they say, well, crime went down in the last 20 years. We passed all of these gun laws and crime has gone down in the state of California. I said, well, you do realize that at the very same time you passed 3 strikes, Megan's Law, mandatory minimums. We passed those same laws. Now, in the last 3 years, what we've been doing is we've been passing laws letting criminals out of jail. And guess what? Crime's gone up. Violent crime has gone up. Gun violence has gone up. Well, we need more gun laws. But wait. We didn't reduce any gun laws. Matter of fact, we've passed more gun laws. So shouldn't gun violence be going down? No. Because, okay, this is going to be a hard one to connect.
This one is hitting it out of the park. He's excellent.
You let criminals out of jail. They commit crime. You keep criminals in jail. If they do commit crime, at least they do it in jail. All right, okay, so you guys get that. They, for some reason, have a very difficult time understanding that and getting their heads around that. But that is where we are in the state of California. That is where we are. And I will just tell you, you know, California is a lot further along when it comes to the infringement of our Second Amendment rights than many other states. But what I will tell you is we are the front lines in that fight. I firmly believe that if when President Bush wanted to fight in Afghanistan and Iraq, and I know a lot of people, even some Republicans, still take issue with those wars, but here's what I believe. I firmly believe this. If we were not fighting over there, we would be fighting here. Because as soon as we stopped fighting there, guess what started happening? We started having to fight here. We started having attacks here.
Yep.
The same thing is true when it comes to the Second Amendment. If we're not fighting in California, we'll be fighting in other states. One of the reasons why we expanded last year, Firearms Policy Coalition expanded to Washington, Oregon, and Nevada. This year we're now in Washington, D.C. And the reason why is because we saw what it was that they were doing. Michael Bloomberg is spending billions of dollars, not just electing candidates, he's poll testing. He's doing marketing. He's finding out what policies, where is there a soft spot? He's in Arizona. And how many of you really wonder, I mean, Arizona, really? He's in Texas. He's in Colorado. He's in Oregon. He's in Washington. He is running the very same drills that he was running in California. He is running there. This is something that is going to go on for a while. We have to be prepared for an extended fight. Because, let's just be real, and I think you all know this. Each generation has the responsibility to fight for the liberty of the next generation, for themselves and their posterity. We cannot abdicate our fight to the next generation. We have a responsibility to fight. And if we are not active now, if we are not holding members of our own party accountable now, and this is why the RLC is so important. Because it's important that when it comes to the fight for the Second Amendment, that we're holding Republicans accountable. Because like I told you, last election cycle, you had the gun apocalypse bills come through, right? You had 6 Democrats who voted against the gun apocalypse bills. You had 4 Republicans who voted for them. The 6 Democrats, they got reelected. Every single one. The Republicans, 3 of the 4 are no longer in the California state legislature. And we are now in the super minority. Or not so super minority. We'll call it not so super minority.
Yeah, right.
It's not super being in the super minority, is it?
Was it Hadley, Lingling, and someone else?
Linder.
Yeah,
Linder voted to ban campus care. But if
He had a C rating from NRA. C. He was my assemblyman. I don't know.
This is what's important to understand is that is that someone, I won't say who, told them, well, in your district, you need to vote